Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of Try Not to Curse. This is a special one for me. We are going to be talking with Satori Shakoor today. Now, Satori, you have been all over the country. You've been all over the world. We're going to get into all of that. But I just want to start off by saying, welcome. You are a storyteller. You are an actress. You are a musician, just an overall well-rounded artist that has just seen and done it all. But where did you first grow up? Let's start with your roots.
I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. And I was probably born in the sweet spot of history. When I say sweet spot, I'm specifically referring to education.
Okay, sure.
So it seemed that everyone had a shared value that education was the key to a bright and beautiful future. So music, art, the arts, everything was available. And so my imagination would just be lit up with anything I was exposed to.
Yeah.
And I was exposed to the violin in the third grade. And it never occurred to me that I would ever play a violin, let alone hold one in my hands. But I had the opportunity to take the violin home and learn how to play it. And I played it all the way through high school, where I studied in high school, and then went on to study voice in university, and subsequently moved to New York and went on to have a recording and touring career as one of the Brides of Funkenstein with George Clinton in Parliament Funkadelic.
Yes, I read that and I was like, oh, that's so. I've seen George. I've seen Parliament Funkadelic, so that was just really cool to see that you were a part of that whole group. And I mean he's just something else, isn't he? Just still so very unique and just. I don't want to say he's changed the game, but he's kind of made it his own and has always been very true and consistent with his messaging and what his interests are. And I don't think there's anyone much like him. So that's really, really amazing that you've been a part of that. How long did you tour with him?
From 78 through 81.
Okay. Excellent.
And then I just recorded after that.
Right. How many did you do? Any like studio albums? Any tours of your own?
Oh yeah. I did anything that you hear coming out of the studio from 79 to 85.
Okay.
From the Boot Seats to the Zap to the Brides to Godmama, whatever. I'm on all of it. It was a factory.
Yeah. And are you more of the funk persuasion, soul, jazz, R&B?
Well, funk. I was in the funk group,
right? But
George had a lot of different styles of music from the Georgia, guitar picking to the acid rock to Bernie Worrell, who was classically trained at Juilliard. I was classically trained. So I come from art song.
Yeah. And was there, I mean, again, we talk about education and exposure and yes, definitely. I would say your generation, my parents' generation, it was all about learn as much as you can, absorb as much as you can. Just like you said, be exposed to any and everything so that you can educate yourself about the world and the future. It is a shame, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be that way. We just had a conversation with Tammy last week about how education is vastly different, not only state to state, but country to country, nation to nation. And it's a shame because I agree that I think the more exposed you are to other things, the more it helps form your opinion, shape the way you view the world, the way we view each other when we have an understanding of where each of us come from. So again, I just want to talk a little bit about your childhood. Was music just really prevalent? I mean, in my family, music was everything. That's what we grew up with. We didn't go on vacation. We went to concerts. We saw everybody live that we could. We still do to this day. So was that kind of something that really shaped you? Did you grow up surrounded by music, just infatuated with it?
I literally grew up surrounded by music. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, Motown. Yep. And so I had the benefit of the WJZZ jazz, WJLB was R&B, and then across the river in Ontario. There was KLW, so I got the Turtles and all that coming to me. So I had wide influences, also church music, and on the street corners where there were groups all aspiring to audition for Motown. So there was literally, after they got off work in the factories, they would be on the street corners, on porches, singing. And so music I was literally surrounded by music and loved music. And then I went on to, like I said, play violin. I was actually playing string parts on some of the records coming out of Detroit at United Sound Studio.
Oh, great.
And to Cass Tech High School, and majored in music. And Harold Jones, he would do the arrangements. And we would go into the studio, and I think they'd pay us $25. and we wouldn't even know what record we were playing on until we heard it on the radio.
Sure. So you were a studio musician. That's fantastic.
And I was, in orchestras. So I was in a jazz group called the Electrifying Strings with Earl Klugh. I was in the All City Orchestra, which were students from all over the city of Detroit. I was in a community orchestra, and I was in my high school orchestra. And so I was exposed to a lot of classical music and could appreciate the combination of African sound and European sound combined.
Absolutely. And again, talking with Tammy last week about her experience as a music teacher, it seems as though, again, just getting back to education, it seems as though the kids don't want to learn the fundamentals, the foundation. It's really hard to get kids interested in learning music itself, how to read music, how to compose. They just kind of want to mimic the stars they see on TikTok and on American Idol. So it's I don't know what needs to be done this day and age. I think it's so hard with technology and social media. I feel like parents need to just take their kids out and just see live performances and really see what it means to be a showman, to present, to tell stories. Because, again, I know you're a storyteller as well, but musicians, I feel they're telling a story. They're trying to portray something. They're trying to, invoke feeling, given their music, their lyrics, the whole package, really. So have you always been a storyteller as well, or did that kind of come as you were getting into the music scene and developing your own style and sound?
Well, let me just go back to what you were saying about education. As I said, there was a sweet spot in history when President Kennedy was president, and it seemed that the whole society and the country placed a very high value on education and the arts. They could see the importance of the arts and dance, and all of this was in school, part of the curriculum, and you could consume yourself with it. So now that value isn't appreciated. Education, the arts are not in the schools anymore. Education seems to be shrinking. There's not a value placed on it, even in the higher learning institutions. There's this mission to shut it down. So thinking and the encouragement to think for yourself is also being diminished. And so here in Detroit, we have some of the best jazz musicians in the world. They played with Aretha Franklin and a lot of the people and toured the world. And so what they do is mentor kids. So we have young kids coming up in initiatives like Mosaic Youth Theater. A lot of different nonprofits will mentor kids and teach them the fundamentals of instruments. And yes, as we were deprived of instruments and reading music, then of course we took our cultural heritage and funneled it into scratching albums and rapping, and so it translated itself into other forms that created new forms of music and art. So even though we're take things are taken away, the artist in all of us find new ways in which to express ourselves, because we have to express ourselves.
Absolutely.
In terms of being a storyteller, I grew up in a household and in a community. My uncle was a minister of a huge church in Detroit, and a lot of his parishioners were from the South. They migrated here during the Great Migration to work in the big three factories here.
Yeah,
and they were all storytellers. They were deprived of, higher education, but what they were masters and PhDs in storytelling. So I grew up with that language and those voices, those Southern voices, and a way of conveying speech that when they spoke, you could hear, you could see the images that they were creating with their words.
Yeah.
So they would make a little movie in your mind, and they would use voices like, "Oh, and Elizabeth said, girl," or they would go, "Well, father," and they were really over the top, expressive.
Yeah.
I remember being a little girl in the kitchen. The men would stay on Sunday afternoons after church. The men would sit in the living room smoking cigarettes and listening to my uncle pontificate on news and the state of the colored race and politics. And that's what they would do. The women and the kids would be in the kitchen preparing the next meal. And I didn't know what they were talking about. But the kitchen would go silent. And you heard one voice speaking, and then the kitchen would erupt in laughter. You could see them dabbing their eyes with the corners of their apron. So I knew somebody was telling the story.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what the story was about, but their laughter was so infectious that I'd laugh too, and I could appreciate having that joy. Surrounded by that joy of storytelling. So it was really to talk about and to express their lives, but more or less to take the pressure off, because most of them are domestic workers. My mother was a maid, and my uncle, who was this big, intelligent, he was a filmmaker, made his own jigsaw puzzles, train sets. He would croquet, he baseball teams. But when he went out into the world, he was a boy. So when he came back home, this was where you could release some of the oppression.
Yeah.
Some of the small ways in which you had to operate and maneuver your life in society. And you could come back and be big and loud and be fully self-expressed. So there was joy always wanted to find its way into the rooms and into their circles.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't mean to disparage education and social media the way things are now, because at some point, again, the internet is so vast. The world is just at our fingertips at all times. So at some point, somebody will encounter something that will inspire them, that will spark a connection. But from our base level, again, from our foundation, I think community is such a catalyst for that. Like you said, for sharing stories, for sharing experiences, but also for inquisitive minds, right? Having multiple generations in the same room. I remember myself growing up at every holiday event with the family, just wanting to sit at the table and just listen to everybody talk and swap stories and talk about people I've never met before in my life, and just remember that time 50 years ago. I've always loved things like that, and I myself really love storytelling, because there's it connects us as much as it divides us, as we're sharing experiences that one may never have, and may never go through the same things that each of us go through. But it's so important to have that sense of community and that shared just love of conversation and storytelling. So I as as disappointing maybe as we feel things are, I still also have that hope that at some point, you know, even though we're not as socialized as we once were, we're not as connected, even though we are extremely connected. I still have that hope and that sense that there's always going to be something out there that will connect with each individual and each group and inspire the next generation. So I don't mean to come down on it. I am also still very hopeful.
No, I think that it's revolutionary, and it's activism to advocate for education. I mean, why we not want to be educated? I love learning, and I do have same hope that you do as artists, as writers, as people who are expressed in the world. We're going to find new ways in which to express these things, and we'll find smaller circles or homeschooling, because we always were homeschooled. Homeschool is not a new concept. Even you had to hide and be schooled in private, in secret. There's an urge. There's just a human need to expand. So we will find a way. And then we do have technology. We have the internet. I can listen to James Baldwin. I can listen to anybody I want to. Nikki Giovanni. I can go to YouTube University.
Yeah.
Hear it out the horse's mouth.
Right. Well, I mean, just thinking just recently, so Ryan Coogler's film Sinners with Michael B. Jordan has just come out. And you know, I was looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of both Ryan and Michael, and I was very intrigued by the subject matter. But when I saw that film, I mean, again, just the way Ryan tells the story, and he tells it through music. He really showcases the power that music has. He goes through generational, all from Southern Jim Crow era, stories, blues, all the way up to hip hop and R&B, and Buddy Guy makes an appearance, a cameo in the film, which was really surprising and wonderful. But just it's all encompassing, and he really does such a wonderful job of telling a story across generations, which was very unexpected. And I think a lot of people feel, because there's vampires in it, and people thought, well, that's kind of weird that there's vampires. But I think he added that element. I think he added that element in the hopes of bringing in a different audience as well, trying to reach as many people as he can through just simple curiosity of, well, okay, so it's about two twins that lived in Chicago and now they're returning to their home in the Jim Crow era South. But yet there are these vampires that come into the mix, and how is this all going to work out? And I think, and again, it's the most successful scare, quote unquote horror film that's ever been put out. It's got the highest, viewer rating and Rotten Tomatoes score, if that means anything to anyone. But I think he was very conscientious about how he was going to tell the story and how he was going to bring people in and capture their attention. And that's just a gift that I don't think a lot of people have these days. There's really not a whole lot of original content out there anymore. And I just needed to bring it up because while I was looking forward to seeing it, being in that theater and sitting there for 2.5 hours, it just blew my mind. And I remember reaching out to every member of my family and saying, you need to see this, because it's just, we're not going to get something like this for quite some time again. So
I went to see it on Sunday.
Oh, yes.
On a regular digital screen. And then 2 days later, I went to see it on an IMAX screen.
Yes.
And I was held in its grips the second time as much as the first. But I think that the vampires, and matter of fact, at the end of the movie, I was like, I want the soundtrack.
Yes.
But at the end, the vampires, I love vampires.
Me too.
From Anne Rice to, all Walking Dead. I like that whole, I like it.
Yeah.
But I think he was... The vampires didn't show up like in The Walking Dead,
right,
which are which are, you see him eating the flesh. You saw a little bit, but I think he was using vampires as a metaphor for sucking the blood out of Black culture.
Absolutely.
And I love the scene where the vampires are all lined up outside of the juke joint, and then in the end, when he's there alone with the weapons, and then the KKK positions themselves the same way. The juxtaposition of the vampires and the KKK,
right,
and the oppression, but I love the courage and the stand that the film took. I loved everything about. But we don't tell linear stories. We tell non-linear stories. So I love that we can pop into the past. We can start at the end and then tell the story from the past, from the end of the film,
right,
and then go back and do flashbacks and just take you on this little journey, and then completely shock you with all of this music and from ballet to funk to, I don't know, Africa to every place, and all I did was sit in awe.
Yes.
I didn't think it was out of place.
Yeah,
I thought it was part of natural flow.
Right. It was just so seamless how it all just came together, and it made sense in every aspect. It was, I mean, again, I Ryan's always been very good about soundtracks in particular. Again, Black Panther, it's very important to him that all of every aspect of what he does is all encompassing as part of the storytelling and as part of the messaging. So I felt the same way when I left. I said, oh my gosh, he's done it again with this soundtrack. It's just unbelievable. So again, for you, storytelling, like you said, in your recording career and in your touring, but when did it become something that you said, okay, well, I can share through my music, but I also have other stories to tell in other ways. Did it start with telling stories from childhood? Did it start with, your own just stories that you've come up with yourself that you wanted to share? What kind of storytelling are you most interested in?
Well, I tell true and personal stories. I also tell fictional stories, but I grew up, like I said, around storytelling. It was a language. And because I grew up with that language, like if you grew up in a household that speaks French, you speak French. So I spoke storytelling. And I didn't think it was anything. I mean, it was like breathing. So you don't go, wow, I'm a breather. I'm going to make a career out of breathing.
Right.
You don't think of it like that. You just know that as you become an actor, you're telling someone else's story through your character. And then I started, I took on becoming a stand-up comedian.
Oh, wow.
And that you have to do bits, And I wanted to do more I wanted to tell stories. So I had to earn my way to a story. So I had to make you laugh. And then I would tell the audience, now I'm going to tell you a story. I promise you're going to laugh, but I can't tell you when you're going to do it. They would laugh. And then, as soon as I said, I'm going to tell you a story, I could see them sit back. And because human beings love stories. So that's when I realized I need a longer period of time than the 5 minutes to tell these little bits, set up, punch.
Sure.
If I want to set up, then punch you, or punch you, then set up. I had my own rhythm, but, and I knew I was a storyteller, but there was no word for it. You were an actor, poet.
Right.
So when I came back to Detroit in 2001, I looked around and then I discovered the Moth.
Oh, yes. I love the Moth.
And so I told a story at the Moth. I won. And they asked me, would I tell a story at the Fillmore Theater? Then they were flying me around the country telling stories. But the first story I told it in several places that I toured with the Moth, about losing my mother and my son. And when I started to get letters emails from all over the world thanking me for telling my story. It was like that was the discovery moment. Oh, I'm a storyteller. This is my purpose. This is a service.
Yeah, and you're forming those connections. Yeah.
And so then I realized I can't make a living, touring with the moth. It's not. And so as I was coming back from hell, from the grief of hell, I noticed Detroit was also coming back. We had been under emergency management, water shutoffs, Flint water crisis, people moving out, the tax base disappearing, and I could see signs of life. And I was feeling like I wanted to live again. And I had experienced the power of storytelling just in sharing my story, how I was beginning to heal. And I thought to myself, well, if storytelling could begin to heal me, could it also heal the city of Detroit? And that's when I founded the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers with no money. So anybody out there listening, have no money, you can do whatever you dream to do as long as the idea is so compelling and so delicious, you will find a way, because Wall Street had crashed, too big to fail had failed. And as an artist, I was on the front line of first to go.
Yeah.
I had supported myself as an actor, as an artist for 12 years, and I definitely didn't want to go back to a 9-to-5. And I had no idea. And when I created Twisted, it wasn't that I thought I was creating a career. It was more like, could people do this?
Right.
And so I started 45 seats. It's 13 years later. And we're on big stages. We've had George Clinton as a storyteller, Dick Gregory, Michael Collier, Naomi Magid Long, state senators, ministers, regular everyday people, you name it, they come on the stage. And then out of that, I branched off into, I have to teach people how to tell stories. Because everybody has a story, everyone doesn't know how to tell it.
Well, right, and again, we're all so used to at this point, a little 30-second clip, and how do you catch someone's attention and hold it, and form that connection. So I think that you're absolutely right. That it's a lost art for sure. So that's fantastic.
So as you're developing storytellers, you're also developing listeners who can listen beyond, who can actually listen for 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to a story, because it's interactive. They're very much involved in the storytelling as a listener, because they're the ones, when I'm talking about my aunt, it's your aunt that you're picturing.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, especially when we go through something like that, like the loss of a family member and a loved one, it's so easy for us to just compartmentalize that and think, I'm the only one suffering. I'm the only one going through this. Nobody has experienced what I've experienced. But when you do share, when you do let people in on what's going on, you come to find out there is a community there, and there are other people that have had similar experiences, or at the very least can learn from your own experience. And I always encourage that. Again, that's a big part of this show is sharing those things, learning about something that maybe you've never really thought about or given a second thought to before, and finding some kind of common ground, or at least, again, having that in the back of your mind. So if something, heaven forbid, does happen later on, is, I remember how Satori got through that, and how they experienced the same that I felt. So I mean, if anything, it reminds us that we're not alone, which I think is also a big problem with society right now, is we all just feel that it's just me against the world, and nobody can relate to what I've been through. Whereas, we're hundreds of billions of millions of people, and we say all this historical stuff has happened, but historical stuff has historically happened. It continues to happen. The earth continues to turn, and time moves on, and we all just need to find that common ground and find things to relate to one another. And then we realize, I'm not alone in this at all. I don't need to suffer by myself or even suffer at all. So I think that's really wonderful. Now, When so you talked about your stand up a little bit there, and that's kind of what has led you to now the society that you've created. But what was what motivated you to attempt stand up? Did you just you told, was there like one joke that you told regularly that always seemed to get a big laugh? You said, well, let me try that out. Or was it more just trying out that performance aspect of it? Or, what was the inspiration there?
Well, I became a stand-up to solve a problem.
Okay.
When I moved to Los Angeles, I was told you have to do one thing. And then when you get good at that one thing, then you can, you get known for that one thing, then you can do other things.
Okay.
And I already was a singer with P-Funk. I was an actor. I was a writer. And it's like, how do you amputate these parts of yourself? So I became a stand-up because it seemed to me that I could write, I could sing, I could do whatever I wanted to as a stand-up, as long as I made people laugh. So I was so excited. Oh, I'm going to be a stand-up. So I went to the Comedy Store the first time, and it was packed. But by the time I was called to the stage in the open mic situation, there were 5 people in the audience. And I talked about my mother and Jesus, and people actually laughed. And when I got off the stage, I was like, I had never felt so satisfied.
Oh, great.
And a young lady approached me. She says, my sister wants to meet you. And I said, okay. And she took me to her sister, who happened to be Sheila E.
Oh,
and
my
she
gosh.
said, you were really funny. And I said, thank you. This was my first time. And she said, really? Well, you keep going. So the next week, I went to Marla Gibbs's comedy place. And mostly Black women in there. And I talked about my mother and Jesus. And they booed me. I mean, I could see the MC coming for the mic. I crawled in the corner. It was like, but my 5 minutes aren't up. We're walking off the stage and sitting there trying to collect myself from the humiliation. And I just sat there and I said, when the comic before you went up, the room was calm. And when he came off, the room was the same way. When you went up, the room was calm. And when you came off, people were in an uproar. Well, you want to change the energy in the room, but you don't want them to boo you.
Right.
So I started taking classes, and then I became obsessed. Like I become obsessed with some of the ideas that I have, and just was doing comedy all the time. And I opened for Joan Rivers.
Oh, wow.
And my first ex-husband, he used to tell me, you should be a comedian. You're very funny. You don't know you're funny. Everybody's funny. You laugh,
That's
they
true.
laugh.
Yeah.
But I was always around laughter. I didn't realize that a lot of times I was causing it. And I would go to 12-step groups whenever I moved to a new city, because then I could meet people and I could learn the town. So I went to a 12-step group. It was women who loved too much. And I would be sharing, and it would be heart-wrenching, and they would laugh, and I would be annoyed, like, why are you laughing at my pain? And then when I started my journey as a stand-up, I would purposely go to and which a lot of comedians did at the time, go to stand-up, go to 12-step meetings all around Los Angeles to try out new material.
Yeah.
So there was a alcohol anonymous group in Beverly Hills on Sunday, which was huge. So a lot of comics would go there and hope to do 3 minutes,
Wow.
And, so it was exciting, doing stand-up, because it's very dangerous.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I went on to, do Second City, Toronto, the Groundlings. So I got the facility of improvisation. And so one day I said and I remember when Joan Rivers came off stage, she was like, how are they? And I was like, they came to see you, 10,000 people, 2 shows for you.
Right.
And it terrified me, because I thought, will there ever be a day when I can just walk out on stage and feel like I'm in my living room and not be like so terrified? And she was showing me, no, there's never going to be a day, because she was the funniest woman in the world. But now I can walk out and it's my living room.
Well, so what got you to that point? Because I feel the same way. Like I've talked about this historically. I do enjoy, conversating with people, but public speaking isn't too bad. I just feel like I just ramble and hopefully I get my point across. But things like karaoke, I don't think I could ever do. Stand up, I certainly feel that I could never do that. But what got you past that feeling of that nervousness, that anxiety, that I may not be good enough? Is it just repetition? Is it just continuously doing the same thing over and over again? Is it confidence? Is it feeling like I'm secure? I know what I'm doing. I'm going out there and I'm going to kill it every time. Where do you get that from?
Storytelling, because I'm going to tell you a story, and my life doesn't depend on whether you think it's funny or not.
Okay.
I remember when I got booed, I became terrified to be booed because I'd never been booed before. And then I said, I can't fix my show. I can't make it safe just so I won't get booed. So I intentionally went on stages and asked the audience, would they boo me? I was looking to be booed so I could experience it, because the first time you booed, it's just you're reacting. You don't really understand what booing is. So I remember I would go on stages and say, I need you to boo me.
Yeah, let's just get it out.
And I would do dead, and they would think it was funny. And so I said, I need a high stakes. So I went to the ice house and I intentionally delivered a joke that wasn't funny. I knew it wasn't funny. And the audience didn't laugh. And I looked at them and they looked at me, and I looked at them and they looked at me. And I realized they're just waiting for me to say something funny. I'm not bombing here. It's just that, so I realized bombing is the most peaceful thing in the world, because the audience is just, they're not laughing, but they're just waiting for what's the next thing you're going to say.
Right.
It may make me laugh, So storytelling is what I am. It's what I do. So it's what I enjoy. So storytelling has I don't have to go, I got to make you laugh every 7 seconds, And so I remember people predicting that comedy would change in the 21st century. And it has. If you look at a Dave Chappelle, if you look at some of the comedians now, they have long narratives.
Yes.
Before anybody laughs. And maybe nobody will laugh. They'll just go, Right. And that's comedy.
Right. I mean, I've seen Kevin Hart. I've seen Chris Rock. I've seen Lewis Black. I've seen it. I love comedians. I love because I love storytelling. I love hearing people's experiences, their triumphs, their tragedies. Because again, we all have that sense of connection, right? I mean, I know Kevin Hart always talks about his father, and you can always relate one way or the other. Oh, I have a coworker like that, or a neighbor like that, or my uncle's the same way. So I think, for me, I always kind of gravitate more towards comedy than, when we talk about the different TV shows and things like that, and people say, oh, have you seen that? Have you seen this? And I say, after a long day at work or running around, running errands, I just want to laugh when I get home. I just need to kind of let the day go. I can't sit with a drama or some heavy, controversial, dramatic show. I need to just laugh and just, release a little bit. That just seems to be the most cathartic thing for me. So moving forward for you, there's a radio program I follow. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's Elvis Duran and the Morning Show. They're syndicated out of New York, but Elvis Duran, the host, he's been doing it for 30 some odd years now, and he always says he believes everyone has a story in them. No matter where you grew up from. I come from a small town in Connecticut. Nothing really exciting goes on here, but everybody has a story. So for you, when you're trying to coach people and instruct instruct people, how would someone start if they wanted to tell their story? Just put pen to paper, just start, reaching into your memory of where's the best way to start with something like that?
Storytelling is an art, it's a craft, and it's a science. So you want to, the science part is the brain. The brain, if you're telling a compelling story, the brain will dump different hormones like oxytocin or dopamine, which are hormones that elicit or make you feel empathy. And that's what you want to create with the listener. You want them to be empathetic to whatever you're saying. You want them to go, what's next? What's next? So I always start into action. If you think about your favorite movie, there's action. Even when you think about Sinners, right? Okay, there's action. He's driving the car. He's opened the doors to the church. He's walking in. All these things, if you didn't see it visually and you described it, you could see. So I'm driving down this dirt, rusty road in Mississippi. I get to my father's church. I limp up. I'm holding a piece of a guitar, and then I open the door, and everybody turns to look at me, and everybody's dressed in white, and my father says. So you want to start in action because all the preamble that people think they need to do, the brain can't get on the bus because it's trying to find an action. Because if you're driving, I'm driving. If I'm weeping, you're weeping. And so every human beings are all designed the same way. So you want to start who, what, when, where. When? 7 years ago, 3 minutes ago, 1998, I was in my mother's living room. It was a tiny little living room when the phone rings and my mother answers and says, "What?" And you go on. You just keep going with action. The bridges, I call them bridges. That's when you can manipulate time. And then 3 years later, or I never thought I could do stand-up comedy, Elizabeth said. Until one day her life depended on it.
Hey.
And she got up there and told the story about why Wakanda versus everybody.
I give you a lot of credit. I really do. Like I said, I enjoy conversating. I enjoy listening to stories, telling stories, but I don't know. I just don't know about, well, I think, you know what it is? I think a lot of people, especially myself, you get overwhelmed with the prospect of, I have to put together a skit, or you know what I mean? I have to formulate. It's not just me telling a story. It's an act in some way. And I think that's kind of where we get hung up, the performance aspect of it. Yeah.
That's where you could relax and know that you're just telling a story. You're at a family gathering and you're telling, somebody says something that sparks a memory. Oh, I remember when I was, and you begin to tell a story. It's not an act, but and then you develop different skills, like dialogue moves the story faster. So if I can say, well, I told Elizabeth, and she said, I said, and we go back and forth. I don't have to describe what you're saying.
Sure.
Or there's a lot of different things you do. You can manipulate time, as I said. There's a lot of things you can do with storytelling. You can start here and then flash back. Well, the reason why Elizabeth was scared of comedy is her mother loved these terrifying clowns, but she was scared of them when she was a child. So every time people's number one fear is to speak publicly.
Right.
And so people would rather die.
Right.
Than get in front of people to tell a story because they fear judgment.
Yes. Yeah. Fear of judgment, rejection.
judgment, rejection. So our mission is to connect humanity, heal and transform community, and to provide an uplifting, thought-provoking, soul-cleansing experience through the art and craft of storytelling. So literally, my calling, my purpose is to coach the storyteller to stand up there and tell a story in which at the end, they accept themselves in public. And I tell them that once you tell a story, you're creating a community in your ensuing words.
Well, and again,
because people can relate to it, and they rush out at the end of the show and say, "I loved your story. My mother had lupus." Da 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 da. Can I have your number? I'd love to book you for something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about, again, that sense of community. Because again, as I said in the beginning, you've lived in a number of different states. You've traveled all over the world. What was it that compelled you to come back to Detroit and to say, this is the place, this is where I want to, really just lay down my roots and establish and rebuild my community, and start telling stories here. I mean, you lived in Hawaii for a little while. You could have taken this anywhere, and certainly, on bigger arenas, bigger stages like New York or LA, where they're more receptive to things of that nature. But why was it so important for you to remain in Detroit, to go back to Detroit?
Well, I was living in Toronto when I got the call from my mother. You got to come home. Noah was in a car accident, my son. I wasn't sure that he would even be alive by the time I got to Detroit, but he did live. He lived for 5 years following the accident. He suffered a brain injury, and he had seizures, and one massive seizure took his life in 2006, which was 9 months after my mother died.
Oh, goodness.
So tragedy brought me back to Detroit.
Okay.
And when I started to unthaw, come back from the devastation of it, my art, I'm an artist, so that was unfrozen too. And I thought, I want to live. I want to live for my granddaughter. I want to live for my life, because he had created a baby. I didn't believe he had a baby because he had a brain injury. And I'm trying to think, well, when did you?
Right.
You were sick. How did you make a baby? But it turns out that in the car was the cousin of his girlfriend who was drunk driving, his girlfriend who was pregnant with my granddaughter, with his child, and her other baby in a car seat. He was the only one in the car without a seatbelt. Okay. There was no seatbelt or seatbelt. So that's how and he was so excited to meet her. He wrote letters. He had a big package, and she would take out the big envelope on Father's Day and read. He sent her pictures. He sent her the Quran. He was so excited to meet her, but he died 3 days before he met her.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
So it was a tragedy that brought me back.
Yeah.
And it was my will and desire to live and serve that had me create new things and pivot.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about where people can find you. Now, again, you said, it's a weekly or it's a monthly show that you put on?
Every third Friday. We don't do shows in January, July, or August, but from February to June and September to December, we produce. You can find us online. We live stream, globally live stream at twistedtellers.org.
Okay.
You can find me on my website, SatoriShakoor.com. There's a link tree there, and you can link up to all of the other Facebook and Instagram, all the other websites. Yeah.
Have you ever considered, or possibly you've already done this, have you ever considered taking it on the road and touring kind of along the way, along the lines like the Moth does, or maybe putting out, some kind of special?
People have asked that, but it would be simpler just to go to the town and produce the show with local people. We were invited by a peacekeeper from the United Nations to come to Utrecht.
Oh, wow.
And we went there and did and installed a version of the show there. So they did about 4 shows in the Netherlands. And people call me all the time, can I do this here in Atlanta? Or I'm like, yeah, but I would have to go down and train them so that
set it up.
The brand would maintain its integrity.
Sure.
But because we have this global live stream, people can see it, or I can come. Now I made my own film, and so I wrote a piece that was so exhausting to perform because I performed it over 3 days. We filmed over 3 days.
Oh, wow.
That I made a film of it because I can't see myself doing that show 8 days a week, 8 performances a week.
Sure.
I'm excited to see. It's called Confessions of a Menopausal Femme Fatale.
I love it. I love it. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what it's about and what they can expect?
It's my story, my 12-year journey through perimenopause and menopause.
Oh, Lord.
And so my purpose in creating the film was to get women talking about this. So I promised myself when I was going through perimenopause and nobody knew what it was and no one could tell me what was going on with me.
Yes.
I'm going to go through it so that I can write about it, so that other women aren't left in the dark. So I started writing the piece in 2019, and I filmed it in 2023. And we got our streaming platforms together, and we'll release either May or early June. And then in the meantime, people are talking about it now. Halle Berry, Oprah.
That's wonderful.
And so it's like, okay, so that piece is done. So I can just kind of drop my film into the listening and the conversations that we're already having.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the conversations are about how to address the symptoms. And my film is about busting the taboos of being a woman and having your body function exactly as it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Talking about things that women don't talk about because we're held to an impossible standard of being a perfect mother. So I talk about postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Talk about menopause, where when I was going through perimenopause, you had all these self-help books, how to get a man. And so, you're not trying to get a man.
Right.
You're not perky, you're not juicy, and you're not relevant if you're aging,
Yeah.
We don't have to. Women today, we're not our grandmothers. We're not even our mothers. We look youthful. We maintain our youth. So my mission now, my imperative is to let's address the symptoms, the hot flashes, the mood swings, the night sweats, the lack of sleep, all of the different symptoms that every woman experiences differently, so we can get to the power and the freedom that's there, because all those symptoms are distracting to what we could actually know. We are tremendous value.
Yes.
We lived life. Now we have really something to share. We've got Michelle Obama talking about menopause, Kamala Harris running for president. We have Oprah. We have the most powerful women in the world. Look at you doing podcasts and bringing people to other people's attention. So we're the most powerful demographic and the largest in the United States. So why hide?
Exactly.
Why perform to the male gaze?
Yeah.
You don't even know them.
No, I love it. I appreciate it. And I say the same thing again. We when we spoke off chat, I had said there's nothing taboo for me, because again, it's all, I feel, all important information. It's all, again, whether it's a shared experience or not, it's, where I'm coming from, what I've gone through, what I am going through. And again, if I can if you can relate to me in any way, or at the very least use my experience to relate to someone else, I think it's all wonderful. So I don't have a problem talking about those kinds of things. I've said I got my first period when I was 9 years old. I have a hormonal imbalance, so I have been on birth control to control my hormones since I was 13 years old. And there are different things that come with that, right? And now I'm going to be 41 next month, and I do think about things like this because, again, I'm a little different. I've got a different timeline than other people as far as how my body changes and reacts to different things. So there have been times when I be going through something and I'm thinking, oh, is this perimenopause? Am I starting? And I'll have people say, that's crazy. You're only 40. And I said, you don't understand how how women's bodies work. You don't it's so unpredictable. Yeah, exactly. And I always kind of refer people to like Steve Martin, for example, where his hair went completely white by the time he was like 25 years old. I said, every single human body is different and just does what it wants to do when it wants to do it. And, again, the more we talk about it, the easier it is for us to come to an understanding, but also to recognize, oh, maybe I've got something going on myself that maybe I should get checked out, or I should at the very least have the conversation. I think it's all very meaningful conversations to have, mm-hmm. But for some reason, I don't know if it's society, if it's our own families, the way we were raised. For some reason, we're told, oh, you can't talk about that. That's not appropriate, or nobody wants to hear about it. But the more we talk about it, the easier it is to talk about, and the more normal, and the more
responsible we can become for the things that are happening to us. We don't have to be shamed or quiet about it.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, there are very few doctors with expertise in menopause, which is a disadvantage to the 6 million women who come into menopause every single day.
Yes. Well, and again, I think
no one to treat them.
Yes.
Or no one can tell them that this is what you're going through. They're misdiagnosed, or people say, "Oh, you're too young."
Right.
Or you. I had my period. I had my period all the way up until 57. My friends were going, "You're still going through that?" And I'm like, I was looking forward to this stopping much earlier. That was the one perk that I felt that I could have, but no.
Yeah, my best friend just went through the same thing. She's almost 60 and same. When is this going to be over already? But yet she was also going through the menopause, the hot flashes, waking up in the middle of the night just drenched in sweat. And she's like, but I still have my period. So again, it affects everyone differently all the time, and you just never know. But I also, again, I think because especially women, we're able to give birth and to create life. We're such a complex body. I know there was a group of scientists that tried to get together to look into hormones, particularly in females, just our imbalances, our cycles, and they were so overwhelmed because, again, woman to woman, we can be so different and so complex that they just kind of abandoned the whole thing. They were just, oh, it's too much. It's like, well, okay. But so, it's almost like scientists and doctors are like afraid to talk to us because they just, where do we begin? It's a whole lot. So I think, again, it's important that women in particular form their own community and have these conversations and share these experiences so we can learn from one another, because Lord knows we're not getting the help that we need from our medical professionals all the time.
And I completely agree with you. What you're saying is dead on. Just start talking about what's going on with you as a woman, and you will be shocked at how many women are chomping at the bit. They just need somebody to start the conversation because they've been holding it in because society says you that's not important. Yeah, we can know about Viagra, we can know about prostrate, we can know about all, at 41, you should be getting ready to at least understand that you're approaching where perimenopause starts. Mm-hmm. You can be on the lookout for it, even if you don't go into it right away, or go into it sooner. But we should know what's coming,
Yeah.
so we can be prepared, and we can just flow through that period, and then take the power and the freedom
Yes.
that our brains are being reworked, because now our reproductive is shutting down, and now we can embrace our full power.
Yes.
And go out into the world and change it.
Yes. Well, and it's a new stage in life, but I like that. I think we're going to end there. I like that. Capture your power, ladies. Hold on to that power and use it to empower others. Definitely. Well, thank you so much. So Satori Shakoor, again, where's the best place for people to find you? And again, you're a writer. If you have books, I'm assuming everything's on your website. So share, where can people find you and learn more about what you've got going on?
You can go to satorishakoor.com or twistedtellers.org. And it'll link up to everything and where I am.
Excellent. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to your special and learning more about all of the wonderful things that you do. Thank you so much for joining us again.
I've enjoyed myself.
Yes, thank you. So again, this was Satori Shakoor. And you guys, this was Try Not to Curse. Thank you again for joining us, and we will catch you next time.